So when I'm getting ready for the day in the morning, I stand in front of a mirror that not only reinforces the reality of darkening circles under my eyes, the deepening lines around my mouth, wherever, it also reflects a window behind me and to my left. The window is covered at the bottom, but the top left is open, so that natural light can come in and maybe kind of make things look better. But from the angle and relationship of the mirror to the window, I can see to the top of this large tree in my backyard. And if you have been over there, which I'm sure most of you have, you know what I'm talking about. There's big trees back there. It's nothing remarkable except, as many trees are, they're home to a lot of birds and a variety of birds. And with gloomy days like today and the vegetation not quite greened yet and blooming, when a shot of color streaks across the branches in my periphery, I notice, kind of out of the side of my eye, that I'm especially attentive to the red cardinals. Those are probably my favorite, so I guess I am in the right state right now. And it always brings me happiness and joy every time I see this flash of red, you know, in the little bits of green and brown. At least for the moment. Well, these last couple of weeks, I've seen a blue of what looks like a jay. And when I grew up in Colorado, I saw a lot of blue jays, and I just haven't seen as many. And so when I saw that, it just got me so excited. I'm like, yay, blue jay in my backyard. But then I saw the next day, I think it was, one that looked entirely white. What the heck? What is this white thing? You know, I knew it wasn't a dove, but it looked like a jay, and then I looked it up, and actually blue jays can be mostly white. So I figured it's probably, you know, a white one. Anyway, it was just it's just fun to look at all these birds and see them in my mirror and help to, you know, lighten my day and start off with some joyfulness. But two things occurred to me when I was pondering this past week. How American is that I have red, white, and blue birds in my tree? Pretty cool. The other thing is, I'm sure there's a spiritual analogy in that. And there is, and I will get to that. But first, starting with today's scripture lesson. But he emptied himself, taking the form of a slave, being born in human likeness and being found in human form. And as I was meditating on this verse, the fact that his becoming, taking the form of a human being, meant becoming a slave to it, seemed pretty profound to consider. The other thing about the way that it is said is in the same way that when God created humankind, we were made in God's likeness, in God's form, in image and in likeness. It's the same kind of language. And I thought that's very interesting that Jesus taking on human form is in the same way that God created us in God's form. To understand the nature of Jesus' body and the nature of Christ's action on the cross isn't easy. Many have tried to explain by either over-spiritualizing the body at the cost of human experience, or overemphasizing the human form at the cost of spirit. So the revelations of, and I've been talking a lot about Julian of Norwich, her revelations of the crucifixion describes what is often referred to as a theodrama, and may help us understand, or at least approach understanding, the action of the Trinity on the cross. In our faith tradition, we attest to Jesus' divinity and humanity, right? This element of infinite divine freedom that created finite freedom and will inform where they meet and interact on the cross. And we can begin to see a bit more clearly when we when we consider the paradox of the nature of existence alone, we are spirit and flesh. We know that there is more than just the body, right? We know that there's something more than that we experience in awe and wonder and joy. So to take what, and some care about these things, but other people find it interesting. It is in Aristotle kind of middle ground of the way that Aristotle would think about things, between the extremes of, on the one hand, the destructive over-spiritualization that brings shame, right? And on the other extreme, sensualization, where everything is about what we feel in our bodies. And to draw up a blueprint of how to navigate this is not easy. Nobody could really do it, but and it would be a hubris, really. The perfect flesh must go, this is how it must go. When we talk about the perfect flesh of Jesus, beyond the realm of the world, we need to understand it beyond our experience of the world, so as to bring both the world and the flesh with it in its transcendence up to God, into God, transfiguring it, not spiritualizing it. It is still the flesh, but it is being transfigured. And that is the only way that we can know that Jesus knows, God knows what it is to be human. It is spiritual, it is flesh, it is one, it is community. That's the Trinity, that dance of making space so that it can be filled and you can be filled again and be more because of it. The work of the cross is not merely an event. At a fixed point in time, it is an action, an acting out at a specific point in time and space, yet this action is from the outside of time while encompassing everything within time by that action. A mystery. How can we understand it? In her meditations on the crucifixion, Christ told Julian that his wound would remain open for as long as it takes, and that is how she could know that all will be well. Jesus died, was buried, and raised up again on that weekend 2 millennia back. Still, Christ's wound remains open to encompass any who are to be saved. So it happened at one point in time, but it encompassed all of time, so that Christ remains there, absorbing us back into him even now, so that all who would be saved will. Any who want to live into their true divine inner self, that is salvation, saved from ourselves, until all who will be saved are. So I read a portion from this book, and I think this is very relevant to what we're talking about. So some of you have already heard this. Nadia Bolz-Weber, she is a Lutheran pastor in Denver, and she ministers to some of the more edgy people there. You will see a lot of tattoos and piercings and whatnot, but you also see people in business suits and the whole range. But she has struggled with, understanding what it means, Jesus, to be crucified and identifying with us and our identifying with him. And so she kind of reimagines the way, or paraphrases the creation narrative, and she uses some kind of salty language, so I will try to censor that, but if I kind of miss a word here or there and something slips, you will forgive me, right? I will do my best. So she goes back and she's talking about in the garden. Who told you you were naked? We don't really know if all the animals could talk back then, or if for some reason it was just the snake. But the snake was a crafty mother. He wanted to stir up some stuff. So in an epic display of triangulation, he decided to gossip with Eve about God. Like an episode of Real Serpents of Eden County, he slithered up and, I think I need a stronger prescription on my glasses. He slithered up to her and was like, honey, you know I totally love you, right? I mean, that's like the only reason I'm saying this, but did God really say that you weren't allowed to eat from any one of these here trees? I mean, did God really say that? Eve replied, well, kinda, I guess. I mean, we can eat of any tree. God just said there was that one in the middle that we can't eat from, and this is weird. We can't even touch it, or else we'll die. The serpent saw his opening. Shut up! God said that! I mean, I know you guys are friends, but girl, you totally won't die. God only said that because God knows that if you eat from that tree, you would be like God, knowing good from evil. It actually makes me feel kind of sorry for God, you know? Eve saw that the tree of knowledge of good and evil was beautiful and the fruit tasty and the wisdom it promised desirable. She ate the fruit. And just to be clear, her unbelievably passive husband, who doesn't do or say anything, ate it too. Rather than living in the freedom God gave them to just be who they were, they listened to a voice other than God's, and they believed the serpent and traded life for knowledge of good and evil. The moment they ate of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, their eyes were opened, and the freedom of life, the freedom of just being with God as God's created being, allowing God to be God, and we to be they who are in need of God, vanish. Which is the exact moment the idea of nakedness was introduced. Before that, it didn't exist. But now the humans covered their bodies out of shame, which is exactly how shame. It obscures the image of God within us. It makes us hide. It makes us afraid of God. It makes us blame others. And we do, don't we? The next day, God was just kind of strolling around the garden and where are you guys? They were hiding. Before the weight of good and evil and the legalistic baloney that has forever plagued religion entered into the minds and hearts of human beings, no shame about our bodies or what those bodies are or how those bodies looked. There is absolutely no reason to hide from God. But rather than just be with God as we were created, the humans chose to try to be like God. And that stuff has not stopped to this day. We love taking our so-called knowledge of what is good and what is evil, of who is good and who is evil, and applying that ourselves and to others like we are God. The very first expression of shame was over our nakedness, over our naked sexual bodies. And since then, we earthlings have tried to define and control and condemn human sexuality. Shame has an origin, and it is not God. When Adam and Eve tried to avoid God, God said, "Where are you?" And they said, "We're here." God then said to them, "Wait, who told you you were naked?" For some reason, God allows us to live in a world where alternatives to God's voice exist. And those alternatives are where shame originates. Maybe you too are hiding, having listened to a voice other than God's. But can you hear God saying, "Wait, who told you you were naked? Who told you that you have to lie to be accepted? Who told you your body is not beautiful and worthy to be loved? Who told you that your sexual expression is something to be ashamed of? Who told you that?" My money is on the snake, and he's a damn liar. There's this new image theory in art, and it's called Bildwissenschaft. You German speakers over there. It indicates a new perspective that brings attention to the way an image or painting or a sculpture is perceived. The image signifies by pointing rather than being described. Okay, so it's like a gesture that moves the viewer to turn around. It points past the self to the other. So if you're looking at a painting or whatever, it communicates beyond just the image that you're seeing, and it reveals something of the creator. So appreciating a piece of art, you don't just notice the lines or the movement or the colors. You notice something of what the artist is trying to communicate, and you notice something of yourself and as what you see in it. And it's in much the same way as a parent holds a child's hand while pointing with curiosity to something else. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 13:12 that for now we see in a mirror dimly, darkly, but then we will see face to face. It is when we see Jesus face to face, and we can do that with each other, then we understand. Our eyes that were open to the knowledge of good and evil, rendering us blind to the inner soul of ourselves and of one another, to our true self, will see clearly once again. What James says is equally true. When I lack faith and do not participate in God's creative action, I am like the one who looks in a mirror and turning away forgets who I am, forgets what I am, whose I am, and whose image I bear. Still, God's grace is infinite. Somehow God's life, God's being reflects divine light through me, through you, off of each other, even in my forgetting. How is it that you are not seeing? How is it that you are being blinded or that your mirror is dimmed? I have another video that meditates on that, and I would love for you to just take these moments to consider what it is that you are allowing, what alternative voice you are hearing other than God's, and listen to what God is speaking to you about yourself in this moment as we enter into Holy Week. Prepare your hearts to be transfigured, transformed by what Jesus has done, who Jesus is. Let's watch. When Jesus came into Jerusalem, he told his disciples to gather a few things and just to tell the people, the Lord has need of it. The Lord has need of us to carry Jesus. And in this week, we have this opportunity, and it's built into our liturgical year every year. And I just ask that you consider being mindful through this week as you walk through each day. We have a couple of services. The Thursday evening, Monday, Thursday services at 6, and we'll begin in the fellowship hall. And then the Good Friday service here, my husband will be helping with music as well. And we'll gather in here at 7. And then next week is Easter Sunday. But as we move to that time, let us together, and I need this as well, and so we're accountability to each other, right? Consider what alternative voices we are listening to, and just be focused on hearing what it is that Jesus has to say to us, for us, in us, through us, as we go. Let's pray. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you that you've opened the way that we could hear you. Thank you that you understand who we are, where we are, what we are, and whose image we bear. No other words. Help us just to be. Thank you. In Jesus' name. Amen.
That is enough for me.
And we still don't have one. Is it on? I turned it the wrong way. Forgive me. Passing from joy into sorrow and on to celebration, elation.
We come to Christ this Holy Week.
Today is only a part of the story.
Jesus' triumph leads to his death to his resurrection.
May you journey May the journey of this week lead you into the fullness of Christ's love. I'm going to sing, Go Now, Enjoy. Remember the day of celebration when Jesus boldly and humbly rode into the city of fear and anger. Do not fear, do not be afraid. Go in peace.
Amen.